Hi, I'm Julia Jackson, and I'm here today for a fireside chat with my friend Namante Nemkimo and her lovely husband, Mitch Anderson. Hi, you guys.
Hola.
Nice to see
Hola
you.
Julia, ¿cómo le va? ¿Cómo estás? Hace tiempo que hemos encontrado, hemos visto, ahorita estamos en el Ecuador de la Amazonía, trabajando muy lejos, pero estamos conectadas.
Hi, Julia. It's so good to see you. It's been a long time since we've seen each other. I'm here in the Ecuadorian Amazon. I'm really excited to talk with you.
Wonderful. It's really an honor to speak with both of you about one of the most critical issues facing humanity. For those of you that don't know and are tuning in, Mitch and Namante run Amazon Frontlines, which is an amazing organization and nonprofit dedicated to the conservation of one of our largest carbon sinks, if not the largest carbon sink on planet Earth, the Amazon. Um, so I first met Namante at, I believe it was at the Leonardo DiCaprio Foundation Gala. And the climate space in general is a very privileged space with not a lot of diversity. And the more I've learned about the solutions to the climate crisis, the more I recognize that the most important solution is to protect our biosphere and empower the indigenous communities who steward these pristine ecosystems. And when I met Namante and Mitch, I was really inspired about the concept of reciprocity, living in harmony, and stewarding the natural world on behalf of the survival of humanity. I founded a nonprofit organization, grounded.org, dedicated to amplifying and supporting solutionists, climate solutionists around the world. And Namante really inspired me a few years ago when I met her. She stood out at this gala in a privileged space as the most refreshing voice to me. And I think as a Western civilization, we have a lot to learn from Indigenous knowledge, leadership, wisdom, stewardship, and how to walk with the earth and not take from the earth. So I fell in love with Namante and Mitch and their daughter Daime right away, and felt a connection to our shared purpose. And I would love if you guys could share the vision of Amazon Frontlines and all the amazing work you are doing to date.
Bueno, esto es muy importante. Como pueblos indígenas siempre vivimos en nuestra selva y tenemos conexión con nuestro espíritu, todo con los animales, la vida donde nosotros vivimos es un vivo y la cultura viva y seguimos conectados, no estamos desconectados, sino que lo que nos preocupa para la vida de nuestros pueblos que defendemos por miles, por siglos, años, es que en nuestro territorio los poderes, los capitalismos nos quieren entrar a explotar petrolera, minera, maderas ilegales, quieren hacer provecho. Pero para nosotros es nuestra casa, nuestra vida y nuestros abuelos defendían y vivimos nosotros todavía.
For us, Indigenous peoples, we've been living for thousands of years, protecting Mother Earth, protecting our forests, our rivers, living in harmony with nature, protecting the wildlife. And as an Indigenous woman, and as a young woman, I'm leading my people to continue to protect these forests and continue to protect our territory. And what we're seeing today is that the economic system of capitalism, giant corporations, are hell-bent on extracting resources from our forest. They don't see our forest as a place, a source of life. They see it as a source of profit. And that's what we're fighting against right now as Indigenous peoples.
And this impacts all of us because
Para mí,
20% of the world's oxygen comes from the Amazon, and currently 5% of all global greenhouse gases are sequestered by the Amazon. And so it's really important for us to recognize how critical Amazon Frontline's work is to conserve biodiversity.
nosotros como pueblos indígenas estamos protegiendo por miles de años, hasta ahora seguimos resistiendo, pero es riesgo vida, por eso es muy importante. No esperemos esa lucha sea para el pueblo indígena, sino todas las sociedades que estamos viviendo en ese planeta, de lo que amamos, de lo que defendemos, estamos haciendo para la vida de nosotros, vida para ustedes mismos. Por eso es muy importante que Julia, tú o otras personas que están escuchando de este medio, nos pueden aliarse, nos pueden acompañar ese proceso de lucha de detener ese cambio climático, lo que está provocando en todo el mundo que estamos viviendo hoy en día en este planeta.
Yeah, the protection of the Amazon is about the protection of our climate. It's about the protection of the entire planet. And Indigenous peoples can't fight alone. You know, we cannot continue to protect our territories alone and go up against these big economic interests. You know, and that's why, you know, as a leader of my people, I've been very vocal in making connections globally with people like yourself and others, and really asking for support and making sure that the world knows that Indigenous peoples need global allies that can support them, that can drive resources to our struggles. And that's why I'm very thankful to be on this conversation with you.
¿Sigo?
Can you share some of the challenges the Waironi peoples have faced since COVID, and if deforestation has increased since COVID or decreased?
Y todo eso.
Bueno, durante tiempo de pandemia ha sido un desafío muy grande. Uno, porque el gobierno, Estado no ha respetado a nuestro territorio. Cuando llegó la pandemia decían cuarentena en las ciudades, más bien el gobierno dejó entrar más petrolero a trabajar normalmente. Y también ingresaron algunas comunidades donde nosotros vivimos, los madereros ilegales. Era un momento de un aprovechamiento que no hubo respeto hacia nuestra casa y empezamos a trabajar duramente como mujeres líderes, como nuestro propio protocolo, como nuestro propio de salvar con nuestras medicinas ancestrales, con el conocimiento, con colaboración de nuestras abuelas. Eso curamos, salvamos, por eso nosotros queremos seguir defendiendo, porque de única manera nos salvó la selva, las plantas medicinales. no salvó el Estado ecuatoriano, no salvó el médico a nosotros. Por eso es muy importante que nosotros queremos seguir defendiendo y seguir esa manera trabajando con nuestro propio liderazgo, nuestra propia autodeterminación en nuestro territorio.
During the pandemic, what we saw is big economic interests in the government. Instead of supporting us, helping us, they really sought to take advantage of the situation. While our peoples were really dealing with the arrival of this new sickness, what we saw was the oil companies continuing to extract oil in certain areas of indigenous territories. And what we saw is also networks of illegal loggers entering into our territories and trying to take advantage of the pandemic and the lack of environmental regulations to extract resources from our land. And for the Warani people and for indigenous peoples across the Amazon, really what we saw during the pandemic was how little we can trust the government and corporations, and how much we can trust our own territory, and how much faith we need to have in our own knowledge. Because in the end, it wasn't Western doctors or hospitals or the Ecuadorian government that was able to save us during this pandemic. It was our own knowledge, and it was our territory. We were able to cure ourselves and heal ourselves with our ancestral medicines. And so that's the big lesson that we've learned during the COVID-19 pandemic.
And biodiversity as well is a hub for other diseases, and it's just a natural process of ecological biodiversity, that there are other future pandemics that could spread if we do not protect biodiversity. So not only is it important for climate and keeping global temperatures at bay, it's also very important to protect biodiversity as well for our own survival. And the correlation between future global pandemics and the onslaught of biodiversity and destruction of Mother Earth are directly linked. And so it's important for people to understand how critical protecting this biosphere is for our health and our future. Can you share a little bit about how many, for context for everyone, how many acres there are in the Amazon, and how many acres the Sabo Alliance has been able to protect, and what has made your efforts successful?
Eso para decir kilómetro, número, como Warren no sabe, podría yo imaginar que viajé en California, que conozco donde mi esposo vive, 10 veces más es diversidad que tenemos en la Amazonía. Es un selva verde muy grande, donde los animales, donde los jaguares, donde los ranas, lagartijas, donde los peces, donde las plantas curativas que tenemos, una diversidad grandísima tenemos, y nosotros eso estamos protegiendo. No es suficiente nuestra lucha para salvar eso, es muy importante. Con esa crisis económica que estamos viviendo, nuestro gobierno no lo va a respetar. El gobierno va a querer entrar a explotar, destruir nuestra selva, y nos perjudicaría a cambio climático, a planeta. Por eso es importante, como gente de ustedes que aman a la selva, que piensen en el futuro, tienen que aliar. Ya no esperemos, porque yo tengo mucho miedo. El gobierno nunca va a respetar los derechos de la naturaleza ni a los pueblos. Va a querer explotar para desarrollar en los países. Por eso es importante. Grandes ONGs recaban fondos y no llega al Ecuador directo, porque ahora de esa manera nosotros lo que estamos haciendo en lucha, ya no vivimos como antes. Nuestros abuelos se iban con la lanza y defendían, mataban y no permitían. Ahora vivimos otra forma, conectado con el mundo, conectado con la gente. Ahora tenemos nosotros mucho respeto a la gente de la afuera, y asimismo la gente tiene que entender, los políticos poderosos tienen que respetar nuestro derecho a la vida. Lo que hacemos, lo que amamos, por amor hacemos, es por planeta.
So I can't talk about how many kilometers or how many miles big the Amazon is because I'm a Guarani woman and I don't know about how many miles there are in the Amazon. But what I do know is I traveled to California and I know how big California is, and I heard that the Amazon is about 10 times the size of California. And what I know also is that right now with the pandemic, we're living in an economic crisis. And governments and industries don't care about the forest. They don't care about the birds and the rivers and the lizards and the frogs and all of the wildlife in the forest. They don't care about the Guarani people and indigenous knowledge and our ecosystems. What they care about is extracting resources from our land. And my message to the world is we can't wait any longer. We can't let just indigenous peoples fight this alone and try to protect our territories alone against these big companies and against the global economic system. We need allies. We need people that can join us and invest resources in indigenous people's struggles. And this is, for the future of, our children. It's for Mother Earth. It's for around climate change. And it's around stopping future pandemics. And that's what my struggle is about. That's what indigenous peoples are fighting for today.
I think one thing too that you guys obviously understand is the urgency of the climate crisis and how little time we have to turn this around. Currently, there's an abundance of global greenhouse gas emissions concentrated in our atmosphere, and no technology will be able to reverse this crisis if we destroy the planet. We need the planet and we need our biosphere to be intact and these ecosystems to remain pristine and abundant in biodiversity to help offset all of the emissions that we are releasing. I was reading that the Amazon alone sits on 76 billion tons of CO2. So not only with warming temperatures and the destruction from extractive industries are we destroying a carbon sink that is helping us survive as a species, we're also releasing carbon stored underground. And so the Amazon is way more efficient than any technology out there, and we have to defend it for our collective survival as a species. And so I really love the work you guys are doing because it's one of the most successful led efforts to preserve a carbon sink that benefits all of humanity. The Amazon is so critical for all of our survival, and we can't take Indigenous stewardship, knowledge, and leadership out of that. The two go hand in hand. So can you speak to why it's so critical that the world really gets behind the work you're doing and Indigenous communities who really are the rightful caretakers and guardians of not just the Amazon, but all of planet Earth?
Ya. Bueno, esto es muy importante porque la gente de sociedades que viven, yo pienso, creo que se han perdido de conexión con la naturaleza, con la tierra, con el espíritu mismo. Por eso la gente no tiene conexión para poder reflexionar porque están viviendo otro espacio. Pero para nosotros como mujeres indígenas amazónicos vivimos con la naturaleza, vivimos conectados con el espíritu, vivimos todo con animales conectados y es un vivo y nos ha dado vida y eso es que nosotros preocupamos. Sabemos cómo respetar a ella nos respeta, nos mantiene ese oxígeno, esa vida, alimentación también y sentimos que es nuestro hogar. Nuestra casa por siglos, años nos ha mantenido, pero la gente de ciudad vive en otro sistema, vive en departamento, no están conectados con la naturaleza, no están conectados con el espíritu, por eso ellos quieren como el papel que es dinero, pero en realidad el aire donde respiramos, el agua donde tomamos, sí, pero poco a poco, donde hay selva verde, Amazonía, en lugares que hay diversidad que nos da oxígeno para vivir la vida misma, Si entran los petroleros y otros más grandes extractivismo fuerte, nos perjudica directo a nosotros y también a todo el mundo, seres humanos que vivimos.
I think that the answer is really simple. People that are living in cities and people from industrial civilization have lost important connections with Mother Earth, have lost very important connections with nature, have lost that relationship. It's out of balance. And indigenous peoples that continue to live in their territories and continue to live in intact ecosystems like ourselves, indigenous women, we continue to have that relationship. We respect nature. We respect our forest because we know that she gives us life. And so we respect her and she respects us. But that's not what's happening in the rest of the world today. And so a lot of the search for new technologies to stop the climate crisis, are missing the point in a lot of ways because the answer is really simple. It's about changing our relationship with Mother Earth. And we're seeing it today, in the middle of the climate crisis, in the middle of a pandemic, that out of balance relationship with our planet, is being really demonstrated by the fact that governments and companies and industrial civilization, continues to try to invade deeper into indigenous territories and remote rainforest regions across the Amazon in order to continue to extract fossil fuels and pollute rivers, in order for the people of the cities to drive in their cars. And that really is about a relationship that's out of balance, which is what needs to be fixed. And I think that indigenous peoples have a lot to offer the world in that regard.
Our mutual friend Justin Winters, that's how we met each other. She's a dear friend, and she recently launched the Global Safety Net, which is a framework backed by a lot of different climate scientists that shows that in the next decade, we have to protect not 30% of the planet by 2030, but 50% of the planet by 2030. And of that 50%, they've found that 37% of the 50% we must protect is occupied by indigenous communities. So we can't do this without empowering indigenous communities to protect these carbon sinks. And I believe we should actually give land back that was taken away because indigenous communities know how to increase biodiversity and properly steward Mother Earth. So it can't just be confined to that percentage. We need a different value set. I think as much as we're in a global pandemic and a climate crisis, we're also in a moral crisis. And we've forgotten our place on this planet, and we're not separate from Mother Earth. We are Mother Earth. And so I think that the work you guys are doing is critical, and I would love for you guys to share some of the legal work you have done, because I think in order to really have a guardrail and to keep extractive industries in check, we have to have legal reform, because right now, even with the Paris Agreement, biodiversity is a whole other convention. Climate change and biodiversity are one. You can't separate them. And of the Paris Agreement, it's basically a failed system, and it might be controversial for me to say that, but I see it as just lip service, and only two countries, Morocco and Gambia, are actually going to be abiding by their Paris Agreement commitments. So we can't do this without legal reform. That's why I'm a huge believer in ecocide becoming adopted in the International Criminal Court as the fifth crime against humanity, because there's nothing protecting us as Earth citizens right now from extractive industries coming in. And a lot of people feel like this is out of my control and I have no say. And so you guys and your work is vital because a lot of people live without knowing what's happening to the Amazon, which impacts all of us. But we can't do this without some sort of legal reform, whether it's ecocide or rights of nature. So can you speak to how you guys have had success with litigation and holding these corporations accountable, and why you think that um, really securing these territories is important to have that legal side to support you?
Ante tenerse.
Bueno, este lucha que hicimos no fue solamente como parte legal, sino era base que los abuelos, los sabios nos acompañaron a construir una mapa. Nosotros los pueblos guaraníes sí tenemos mapa, sí sabemos dónde ir a ver, pero lo único que era problema, no teníamos imagen para mostrar al gobierno, porque el gobierno solo selva verde ve y dice que es baldío, solo piensa aprovechar recursos, sacar, destruir, pero para nosotros pueblos guaraní vivimos, es importancia la vida de la selva y es lleno, puro de vida. Hay los selvas, hay donde lugares, los animales, hay lugares donde tenemos que ir a ver plantas, hay lugares donde sagrados. Eso empezamos a trabajar con un grupo, con los mayores y con las niñas dibujando y caminando y cogiendo GPS con cámaras y construyendo un proceso casi 2 a 4 años. Justamente el gobierno ecuatoriano nos estaba pronunciando donde yo vivo, donde es nuestra casa, decía que existe bloque 22 para que las empresas, cualquier empresa que tiene interés, que tiene mucho dinero, paga al gobierno y entra a explotar. Pero el gobierno no vio que nosotros como guaraní vivimos, somos dueños y hemos vivido con ellas por miles de años respetando. Eso no hizo. Pero con el trabajo que hicimos, con esa lucha fuimos a salir a demandar, obviamente con los abogados. Primero, ese es muy importante para gente de afuera, es abogado legal, piensan, pero nosotros hicimos nuestro propio autónomo, nuestra propia gobernanza, nuestras propias decisiones. Eso fue la verdad hacia el mundo. Y eso hacia el mundo que ganamos fallo al Ecuador fue, para mí, es una victoria muy grande para el Ecuador y para otras nacionalidades y también para otros pueblos indígenas. Así debe respetar el gobierno. Nuestra casa decidimos nosotros. No es de venta porque nos ha sostenido la vida y para el planeta.
So we have a big experience protecting 500,000 acres of our rainforest, primary rainforest, some of the most biodiverse rainforests on the planet, our home, our ancestral territory, from oil drilling. And we used the law to do so. But the way it started was we created a map of our territory because we realized that we know our land and we know what it's worth to us, the value that it has, the value that it has for the world. But what was clear to us is that the outsiders didn't. The oil companies didn't, the governments didn't, and people around the world didn't. And we wanted to show that there are two visions. There is a vision about the forest as a life-giving home for Indigenous peoples and for the world, and for wildlife. And there's a vision of the rainforest and our territory as a place to extract resources for profit. And the Ecuadorian government denominated our land Block 22, and we're planning to concession it off to the international oil industry. And so we gathered together with our elders, women, youth, to create a territorial storytelling map, to show the world how important our land is, and also as a tool for our own people to self-govern and to manage our territory in the best way and to understand the threats that our territory faces and that the rainforest faces. And when the government wanted to enter into our land without our permission, we used the law and we used legal strategies in order to ensure that the government couldn't violate our rights, which are internationally recognized, and couldn't bring on oil infrastructure and machines and drill wells in our territory and pollute and destroy our forest. And obviously, we worked closely with legal team and Amazon Frontline's legal team, but at the same time, we were exercising our autonomy and our self-determination. Our elders have been protecting our land with spears for centuries, and now our youth are learning new tools like mapping and like litigation strategy and communication strategies to protect our territory. And in the end, we set an enormous precedent, protecting 500,000 acres of forest against oil drilling, but also setting a precedent for indigenous nations across Ecuador and across the Amazon to do the same. Because in the end, indigenous peoples are the owners of huge tracts of ancestral territory across the Amazon, and we have the right to decide what happens in our territory, and we need to be able to exercise that right. And that's really the value of our legal work, is to ensure that there are good precedents that other indigenous nations around the world can use in order to continue to protect their land against short-sighted economic development.
Yeah, a lot of industries are very short-sighted and are putting profits ahead of the survival of our species. And for me, it's very simple. If we don't have a planet, there will be no profits to be made by any corporation. And so it's actually in their best interest to stop these destructive extractive practices. Not to keep rattling off statistics, but something that really bothered me as a philanthropist. In the beginning, I was gifting to different types of causes like cancer. My father died of cancer. And then I learned through Justin, actually, that less than 2% of all philanthropic giving worldwide, and it's still this percentage to date, goes to the environment. And of that, only 0.2% of philanthropic capital is reaching communities on the ground. So we have barely any money going towards the protection of our planet. And we need to scale philanthropic giving and all sectors of society, really, because it can't just rest upon the private sector. We need all hands on deck, but it's really unacceptable that no money is reaching communities on the ground. Um, so I think your guys' work is vital to the survival of our species, and um, I would love for you to share how you think it can be scaled and what you need um, from the world to really get behind your work.
Voy a responder. Última de esos meses he sido yo reconocida, muchos premios, Naciones Unidas, otras organizaciones nomás, pero yo recibí un fondo de Goldman, que es una fundación verde que apoya como primera vez en la historia. También recibimos $200,000. Eso empecé a donar, invertir para poder nosotros seguir defendiendo a nuestro territorio, para tener esa diversidad sano, no explosivo, para cuidar para la vida de nosotros mismos y para el planeta mismo. Es muy importante, Julia, que tú preguntas. Es cierto que grandes organizaciones, ONGs, dan como igual como al presidente dan para extraer explotación, lo mismo da cantidades, millones de dinero a fundaciones grandes, pero no llega a las comunidades para el apoyo, nunca ha llegado, y eso sí reconozco. Yo, parte, no estoy como de acuerdo de esa manera. Es mejor que nos apoyen a nosotros directamente, que somos líderes, que estamos también arriesgando nuestra vida. Lo que hacemos nosotros estamos arriesgando, porque el gobierno ve que esa mujer o esta joven es como que ella nomás defiende, sale así, y es a riesgo también. Es muy importante, sería que ustedes o otros que están escuchando nos alien, nos donen también recursos. Mira, yo siendo mujer, wow, primera vez recibiendo, yo no me recibí mi plata B, sino para seguir trabajando, para seguir estratégica de tener, invertir en educación propio, para seguir defendiendo nuestras limitaciones, control, vigilancia, formando líderes a los jóvenes. Eso estamos empezando. Esa manera creo que vamos a sostener esta diversidad. También la gente que aman por la vida, que defienden por la selva verde, tienen que aliar y tener esa estrategia en vez de dar a las organizaciones grandes afuera, sino acompañar directo en nuestras organizaciones, como está acompañando día a día Amazon Proline y Alianza Seibo, y como mi organización estamos teniendo una estratégica para formar líderes que ellos mismos pueden controlar su territorio, su valor, invirtiendo a sus niños, a sus jóvenes. En esa forma estamos trabajando. Y eso sería, bueno, Julia, tú también eres una mujer joven que ama la planeta, que mucha habla de oxígeno, nos podría colaborar, nos podría aportar ese apoyo.
Julie, I really think your question is so important, and I just want to say to start that, last year after winning a victory against the oil industry and protecting 500,000 acres of our people's territory and setting a precedent for Indigenous rights, I received many different awards. I received awards from the United Nations and was included in the Time 100 list, but I also received a prize from the Goldman Environmental Foundation. And, it was the first time that I had ever received a prize like that, but it came with $200,000, which was a prize for me as a leader who had helped lead my people to protect our land. But what I knew is that I wasn't alone in this fight, and that our victory was collective. It was a battle that we won all together, our elders, women, our ancestors. And so what I did was I decided to donate $200,000 to the protection of the Amazon. And with Amazon Frontlines and the Sabo Alliance, we launched a campaign, recognizing that your statistic, recognizing that around the world, there's very little donations going to fight climate change. And of those donations, very few actually ever make it to local communities and to Indigenous peoples that are putting our lives on the line. Innovating strategies to protect rivers and forests, protect the biggest carbon sinks in the world, and the resources just aren't getting there. And so, thank you for recognizing that. The work that we're doing, is important and critical because we're building models for how Indigenous peoples can continue to protect their territories in the 21st century against all of these threats. It's not just about winning a legal battle against the oil industry, but really it's about building capacity, alliances, and power on the ground for Indigenous people so that we can continue to flourish and prosper in our territories and continue to protect the lungs of the earth. At my organization, with the Warani people, we're working on building young leaders. We're working on youth education and making sure that our youth are growing up with connections to their territory and understanding of our culture and spending time with the elders, but also growing up with the tools that they need to defend our lands and to manage, the confusing threats that we're facing from the outside world. We're working to empower women. We're working to create land patrols and governance strategies in our territories. And so a lot of the work that we're doing, is about how we can build models that other Indigenous nations can follow. How can we scale our work so that we can support Indigenous nations across the Amazon through exchanges, through capacity building, and through employing some of the same strategies that have been successful here in the upper Amazon. And, for me, Julia, knowing you as a young woman who loves the earth, who loves nature, and who understands the critical role that we play as Indigenous peoples in protecting the lungs of the earth and keeping in balance our ecosystems and our climate, it's so important for you to support Indigenous struggles to support our work. And I hope that you will support the Frontlines Challenge that we've launched and support Indigenous communities around the world. And hopefully that people that are watching will also do the same.
Thank you. Yeah, I hope to completely. In the past, I was giving to different environmental organizations, and I've decided that moving forward, only want to focus on Indigenous-led efforts and litigation, earth litigation efforts, because I think those two are the most important um, solutions we have. I know that Elon Musk recently tweeted, I'll give $100 million to whomever invents the best carbon capturing technology, but we already have it. It's the Amazon, and it's other biodiverse regions across the planet. And if we really want to help continue to sequester and offset rising global temperatures, we really need to preserve our Amazon forest, and we can't do it without the guardianship and leadership of Indigenous communities. I definitely think intercultural dialogue between youth and elders is really important. And can you share what Amazon Frontlines is doing with youth education, and how important it is to, and why it's so important to educate youth to continue these values?
Propias que hicimos y todo eso.
Bueno, esa pregunta es muy interesante. Los abuelos nos guían y nos aconsejan que nosotros como jóvenes tenemos que tener, como niños jóvenes tenemos que tener esa conexión con la naturaleza, respetando a esta vida, diversidad que tenemos sanos. Si nosotros dejamos vencer por el gobierno, extractivismo, eso puede destruir nuestro idioma, nuestro conocimiento va a desaparecer. Por eso es muy importante nuestro propio conocimiento, nuestros propios valores, idioma, cantos, rituales, medicina. Tenemos que hacer una práctica, los ancianos nos tramitan a nosotros y practicamos para que no se desaparezca, porque algunos indígenas pueblos por extracción, por contactos por muchos años, ya no tienen ese conocimiento, ya no pueden hacer su medicina, ya no pueden hacer veneno, ya no pueden hacer muchas cosas, canto, ya ha habido muerte. Por eso es importante, nuestra gente, Guaraní somos recién contacto, hace 50 años atrás, tenemos todavía esa diversidad, ese conocimiento viva, porque vivimos ahí con nuestra tierra, con nuestros silvestres, con nuestros bosques, con nuestros animales, y eso queremos seguir protegiendo. Es muy importante porque sabemos que los abuelos están muriendo, están desapareciendo, y por eso queremos hacer nosotros, recopilar toda esa historia y escribir, para que tengamos esa manualidad que pueden leer mitos, cuentos, historia, con qué se curaban, cómo se cuidaban cuando enfermaban, cómo que eso está en ese proceso. Todo ese conocimiento es muy importante para los niños guaraní, y también es muy importante la educación del moderno, del mundo occidental, que se puede ayudar a base construir. Digamos que la educación de afuera es valioso y también es peligro, riesgo. Eso vemos y eso hemos identificado como pueblos guaraní, como estamos generando, poniendo para construir propio, para poner propuesta al gobierno, que eso queremos que sirva nuestra educación para seguir defendiendo, para no seguir perdiendo nuestras costumbres, nuestros idiomas.
Yeah, everything that you said, Julia, is so important. And, for us, what we're seeing right now is, a lot of the threats, a lot of the loss of territory, over the years are really affecting our cultures, and the way our youth and our people practice our cultures. And so what you're seeing is in areas across the Amazon, Indigenous peoples that are living in more degraded forests, that are surrounded by roads, they're surrounded by cities. They're losing their language, they're losing their songs. Their songs are dying, their language is dying, and they're losing their knowledge. And in the end, their connection to the forest, and that is what makes us such good stewards and guardians of this forest is our connection and our love for this forest. It's what makes us put our bodies and our lives on the line to protect our territories. And so, what we're seeing is the importance of investing in the transfer of knowledge from the elders to the youth. And there's many different strategies that we're deploying to ensure that that happens. You know, everything from working to overhaul the current educational system so that our kids in schools have the opportunity to learn about our knowledge systems, our science systems, our way of our way of life in the forest. That the elders can participate in the educational system in that way. We're also really working with the elders to transfer down all the practical forest skills that youth are losing, the skills that are needed for survival in the forest, in order to heal and to cure ourselves with plant medicines, in order to hunt and in order to fish. And so, we're really using a whole range of strategies, and we're piloting a lot of different smaller projects in communities to find the right models to ensure that our youth, continue to stay connected to the forest. We were only contacted by Western civilization 60 years ago, and we're already seeing a lot of our cultural knowledge being lost. But we also realize how important it is to learn Western knowledge systems and to have a really good Western education. And so we're really focusing on that as a way of ensuring that we don't go over the cultural tipping point where Indigenous peoples lose our cultural traditions.
And it feels like such a heart-based connection. The whole concept of reciprocity and that we're all one and interconnected and interdependent is very shared amongst Indigenous communities, but the Western world seems to forget that in order to really be a steward of our environment, it has to come from the heart. I think the climate conversation and efforts are very cerebral and science-based, and we need that. But I think we also need to learn how to properly live in harmony with the natural world and steward it from an Indigenous perspective. So I would feel much more comfortable sleeping at night if I knew there were more Indigenous leaders in office and Indigenous leaders really showing us the way and how to protect the planet. And I hope to join you guys in this lifelong journey. For me, the climate crisis is very personal. I lost my house and everything in it to the Kincaid fire. And so I've lived the impacts of the climate crisis firsthand. And it's really a question of our survival at this point. If we don't step up and protect the Amazon, we will not make it as a species. We have to defend these territories. I see it as we have no choice. So thank you guys so much for your work. I see it as the most critical work we could be doing. And I hope for everyone watching this that you check out Amazon Frontlines and learn more about why the Amazon is so important, why it's more efficient than any technology out there to date. I'm not saying we don't need technology and innovation. It's just what's most important is the protection of our biosphere, biodiversity, love of life, love of the natural world, love of each other, and reclaiming human dignity. And going back to more empathy and connection with each other, because I think that a lot of people are lost and they're looking for guidance and they're looking for leadership. And so I really look up to both of you and your efforts. And I will walk with you guys the rest of my life. I plan on it.
Gracias, Julia. También es como asumir, también hay otras personas también que tengan corazón, que nace. Lo que hacemos, yo como mujer siempre deseo de este corazón y tengo amor hacia Amazonía y tengo amor a mi cultura. Eso me ha identificado y no me ha hecho cambio. Eso ha dado la fuerza para seguir luchando y trabajar estratégica, no solamente mi persona, sino las mujeres que sienten ese corazón como tú y los demás también puede ver y esa forma podemos construir para el mundo, para detener y cambiarlo.
Thank you so much, Julia, for your words, and for me, love has always been the force, behind my struggle to protect the Amazon. My love for the Amazon, my love for my culture, it's never weakened. It's only grown. And so you're right. We need love for life. We need love for Mother Nature in order to win these battles. But we also need to be strategic, and we need to build alliances, and we need to work together in order to defend our territories, the Amazon, and our natural systems, and Mother Nature, if we're going to survive as a people. And so, thank you so much for this conversation.
Thank you, guys. I think I would like to end on speaking a little bit about the Jaguar, Mitch, since you're wearing a Jaguar shirt and the importance of different species in the Amazon. I know we only have a few minutes, but if you guys could speak to why the different species of the Amazon are so important, including the jaguar, and why we must protect them. I'd like
Los
to
animales son los animales, todo animales de la selva, he visto que una vez que otro lado de la montaña comen y llevan la semilla y le botan, cargan y crece a otro lugar. Es como que animales naturalmente se van cultivando los productos, los animales mismos se van cuidando a la naturaleza y también los animales mismos, cuando llega peligro, nos avisa nuestra cultura. Es muy importante. El jaguar es para nosotros es Dios que nos guía a nosotros. Si es peligro, nos conecta, nos avisa. También los animales, si va a llegar las enfermedades, también nos avisa que lo que está pasando en la planeta. Eso es lo que tenemos nosotros. Conexión. Yo podría dar un ejemplo claro que pasó esta enfermedad, pandemia. Había donde mi comunidad muy cercana, en mes de enero, era justo para ir marcha en el Quito, lo que estamos haciendo para que la sentencia cumpla el gobierno. Justamente había una manada de animales que es huangana, puerco del monte, murieron 50 huanganas y los jóvenes, como no sabían, se dijeron, ellos murieron ahogando agua y trajeron bastantes carnes y llevaron a una fiesta para comer. Pero los adultos ya sabían que decían que no hay que comer, no hay que topar. Los animales revisaron, vieron que el cuerpo del animal estado bien. Solo murieron 50 huanganas. El sabio dijo, ese es un señal que va a llegar una enfermedad muy fuerte que nos va a matar a toda humanidad, no solamente la gente de la comunidad. Y ese cumplió.
So yeah, the animals in the forest. I mean, first off, animals are always planting the forest. They're eating fruits and then leaving seeds elsewhere. So really, you can think of the animals of the forest as those who have essentially planted the entire Amazon rainforest. For us as well, the animals are who alert us to danger. We're always aware, and they're speaking to us, and they're connecting with us. For us, the jaguar is our God. It's our spirit animal. It's who we communicate with in our dreams. And I can tell a story about right before the pandemic. We went to a march in Quito to fight for our rights in front of the Supreme Court. And when we returned to our forest, there was a pack of wild boar who had died. And our elders said, the animals have died here because there's going to be disease across the world. And so even these wild boar and our culture, we knew that a pandemic was coming before it actually happened. And so for us, the wildlife of the Amazon is the essence of the forest.
Thank you so much for this conversation. Please, everyone watching, check out AmazonFrontlines.org. Get involved. Mitch and Nemo and the Sabo Alliance are really, to me, the most impactful organization working to protect and steward the Amazon. So check out Amazon Frontlines and get behind it and support it. And then if you would like to check out the launch of our digital summit, we were an in-person summit at Grounded, but now we're pivoting to an online summit. We will be launching Earth Day, so you can check us out at grounded.org. Thank you so much for this conversation.
Gracias. Wagoy.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much. Wagoy.
Wagoy.